Hello and welcome to session 2 of the Being Witnesses course.
In this session, we're going to be thinking about our faith journeys and ways of sharing our story with others.
A few years ago, I witnessed a crime, and having given a statement to the police, I was then told that I would need to give evidence in court. I was naturally worried about being a witness, but the advice from the police was simply say what you've seen.
In faith sharing, we're doing something really similar. Being witnesses is about saying what we've seen. So sharing and talking about the difference that knowing Jesus has made to our lives.
The story of how I became a Christian starts here, in Durham City. I come from a family that didn't go to church, and I never really thought about God. When I was a teenager, my parents separated, and I had spells of living with my mum and then with my dad. Through a number of family circumstances, I found myself becoming more and more selfish and self-centred. Age 15, I started going to pubs and clubs and watching bands. I loved rock music and formed a band with a few friends. Over the next few years, drinking and music became more and more important to me. I was also around people who were regularly doing drugs. Another part of my life was that I was stealing on a regular basis. My approach to life was that no one ever gives you anything. So anything you want out of life, you've got to take. This same selfish, self-centred attitude was also reflected in my relationships. I was increasingly unhappy and felt trapped in a destructive and downward spiral. When I was about 18, I met a Christian family who were very kind and supportive to me, and I'm afraid I exploited their kindness and generosity. The family discovered my deceit. When they challenged me about it, they said they wanted me to know how much I'd hurt them, but also that they forgave me. That gift of forgiveness had a profound effect on me. I realised that I was making a mess of my own life, but I also recognised that I was damaging other people's lives who didn't deserve that. I began to recognise the consequences of my self-centred attitude. I started going to church and exploring the Christian faith. I became more and more convinced that I needed to be forgiven and start a new life with Jesus. There was a clear moment of deciding to follow Jesus, and in quite an extraordinary way, my life changed very quickly and for the better. Within about 6 weeks of deciding to follow Jesus, I had a sense that God was calling me to serve him, which in time led me to being ordained as a priest in the Church of England. At the heart of my faith today is a desire to serve God with the whole of my life, and I want to help others to discover the difference that Jesus can make in their lives. So here we are today outside of St. Nicholas's Church in Durham, the place where my Christian life began.
My faith journey is really quite different to David's. I grew up in a Christian family and I was baptised as a baby. I went along to church and my faith was nurtured through attending things like Sunday school and youth groups. I would say that I've always had a relationship with Jesus, but there have been moments in my life where I've really owned that for myself, and also opportunities where I've publicly committed myself to Christ, such as at my confirmation. It's not always been simple and straightforward. I've found faith quite challenging sometimes, and I've struggled with seasons of quite serious doubt in my faith. But God, through close friends, through the church community, has encouraged me and challenged me. And my faith has taken me to some quite interesting, some exciting and some quite surprising places. I now find myself living here in Durham, training for future ministry.
So whatever your story, whether it's a story of a clear and definite choice to follow Jesus, or a faith that's grown gradually over the years.
The important thing is that it's your story, and it's something that people are going to be interested in hearing about.
A story, a faith journey, a testimony can split into 3 parts. The first part will be the story of your life before you knew Jesus, or perhaps it may be the background that you had growing up in the faith. The second part would be that moment of choice, choosing to follow Jesus, or it may be a series of moments where faith has moved to a new and deeper level. And the third and last part of the testimony is the story of what Jesus means to you today.
The really important thing is that we're sharing a story about a relationship with God through Jesus, and not just a story about going to church.
So, whatever your story, whether it's a gradual journey or a moment of clear choice, it is a testimony of how God has been at work in your life, and it is a story worth sharing with others.
As you've been sharing your faith stories with each other, some of you might have started thinking, my story's really not that interesting. I don't think anyone's going to want to hear this.
Well, that isn't true. Some recent research has shown some very interesting and perhaps surprising results.
What do people outside our churches know about Jesus? Have they ever had a conversation with a practicing Christian about Jesus? Answers to questions like these could really help us share the most amazing news, the love of God for all of us through Jesus. So we asked, and here's what people, your friends and neighbours, said. 57% said they're a Christian. 9% are active Christians. They regularly go to church, pray and read the Bible. Useful starting place. But what do they actually know about Jesus? 21% think he's God, while 30% think he's a spiritual leader or prophet. But only 60% think he was an actual, real, historical person. Our job here is clear. Let's make sure everyone gets to hear that Jesus actually lived and walked on earth and that he claimed he was God. How are we going to do this? Well, 67% said they know one of us, an active follower of Jesus. And we're most likely to be their family and friends. But have we ever spoken to them about Jesus? 58% of those who know us have had a conversation about Jesus with us. Now that's a great start. But what do they think about Jesus after that conversation? 1 in 5 are open to knowing and experiencing more about him. That's 1 in 5 of your friends and family members, the people you know really well, who are waiting for you to talk about Jesus with them. And we found out that talking to someone who knows Jesus was really important in helping 36% of us decide to follow Jesus for ourselves. So let's talk Jesus.
So, in a marketplace like this,
And in the villages, towns and cities of our diocese, there are lots of people who are interested in hearing our stories about Jesus and the hope that he brings.
Jesus calls us to be his witnesses. Witnesses by our words, by our actions, our attitudes, and by our lifestyle.
So we might witness through getting involved in the local community and serving others. It might be through seeking transformation in the world and fighting for justice, but it must include speaking about our faith in Jesus.
There is a quote attributed to St. Francis of Assisi that says, "Preach the gospel to all of creation. Where necessary, use words." Now, some people have interpreted that quote as meaning that actually all our witness should be through our actions and our attitudes, that somehow to use words is an admission of failure. What the quote is actually saying is that our actions and our attitudes and our words need to fit together.
Similarly, Pope Francis has said that the greatest form of human deprivation is to deny somebody the opportunity to hear the good news of Jesus. Jesus called his disciples to be fishers of people. So we're here by the River Wear to find out about David's extensive fishing knowledge.
Now, I have to be honest, I've only ever been fishing once in my life, and I didn't particularly enjoy the experience. But I did learn an important lesson about faith sharing. When you're fishing, what do? You set yourself up by the side of a river, and then using a catapult, you fire out bait into the water. Then, using your rod, your line and your hook, you cast into the same area, hoping that fish will have been attracted by the bait in the water.
So when we're sharing our faith, we won't often be asked to tell the whole of our faith story, but we will have opportunities to fire out faith bait with the hope that people might be attracted or interested in what we've said.
So, for example, if you've had a really terrible week and somebody says, "How are you?" you could say, "It's been a rough week, but at least I've been able to moan to God about it when I was praying this morning."
Or if someone asked us what we did at the weekend, we could say something really positive about the church service that we attended.
Or if something good has happened, you could say, "I feel really blessed."
It's not about levering a comment about Jesus into every single conversation or manipulating things so that we can talk about God. It's just about being natural and allowing our faith to be part of our everyday talking. Of course, with the fishing analogy, it doesn't end well for the fish. But when we're talking about sharing faith, we're giving people a glimpse of the very best possible news they could ever hear.
St. Paul talked about letting our conversation be seasoned with salt. All this talk about fishing is making me hungry. Let's go to the chippy.